concessions that you make and then wanting more. We used to joke in Soviet arms control days about a famous Russian negotiator who used to greet the Americans every morning with a jovial, well, what have you got for me today? And that's what we're hearing from Russia. This is something Putin prepared the ground for. You know, last week he said he agreed with Trump that in the comments Trump had made in the election that the war never would have taken place had Trump been president. So he began the flattery campaign, the release of Mark Fogel, the American hostage, part of the flattery warm-up campaign, make Trump look like the center of attention. Belarus's decision to release an American and a couple others, part of the flattery campaign. It's obviously working.
Trump said today also in his own readout of the call that he put out that Putin repeated back to him about using common sense to end the war. Do you think that that's part of that flattery campaign?
Right. Well, there was a tweet or whatever you call those things on Truth Social that said, Putin used my very effective campaign slogan, common sense. I think we all believe in common sense, but he noticed that Putin had picked up that line. It's another stroke of flattery. I mean, you got to say, Putin hasn't forgotten his lessons as a KGB agent maneuvering an operative around. And there are broader significances than just in Ukraine. This is a palpable harm to American national security, because what Hegseth and Trump did today was not only blow up the NATO position on Ukraine, they blew up a thing called the Belavasia Accords that Ukraine, Belarus, and Russia signed in December of 1991 that broke up the Soviet Union along the lines of the internal republics. So it means that not only is unprovoked aggression by Russia against Ukraine now okay, every other former republic in the Soviet Union is vulnerable to the same thing without any indication that the U.S. will do anything about it. And I think the people who are paying the closest attention to this outside of in Ukraine are in Beijing, where they see the United States unwilling to act against unprovoked aggression in the center of Europe. What are they thinking now about Taiwan?
If there is any chance that this works, when you look at the dynamics here, do you believe that there's a way that this could be successful, that it could end this war that has gone on for as long as it has now?
Well, I think it'll be successful for Russia. It's a war of attrition. Russia's the bigger country. I think 3 years of mishandling by the Biden administration, dribbling out weapons assistance one system at a time after months of argument, prevented a really strategic response to the Russian invasion. So there's a lot of blame to go around here, but the surrender is going to be signed by Donald Trump.
Can I get you just before Trump swore in Tulsi Gabbard this afternoon in the Oval Office? Pam Bondi swore her in, but Trump was there, obviously, inside the Oval. How does that presence as the Director of National Intelligence by Tulsi Gabbard, do you think, shape the Trump-Putin relationship in a second Trump term?
Well, I think Putin couldn't be happier. I tell you, they're drinking vodka straight out of the bottle in the Kremlin tonight. It was a great day for Moscow. I think Tulsi Gabbard's role as Director of National Intelligence is going to be extremely harmful to our national security. I think many allies are now going to think twice before they share intelligence with us. I think it'll impair our ability to gain confidence around the world. It was one of his worst nominations, beyond a doubt.
Ambassador John Bolton, thank you for your perspective tonight.
Thank you.
Also here is the former Deputy Director of National Intelligence, Beth Sanner, and it's great to have you. You know what it's like to be in the meetings for these kinds of calls. We don't know about Zelensky's involvement in any meeting that Trump may have with Putin. We do know that Saudi Arabia is potentially the destination for that first meeting. What significance do you see in that, if any?
The Saudis are definitely playing this very well for themselves because the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, is saying no to Trump on a lot of things. He's saying no on Palestinians being forced out of Gaza. He's saying no on pumping more oil. And so here's something he can say yes on and be part of a solution. So there's a lot going on with that. But I think that the main thing about this is that this idea of just having Trump and Putin alone negotiating in Saudi Arabia is just a terrible idea. And they really need to turn this into proximity negotiations, just like with Hamas and Israel in Qatar, where they're there but not in the same room. That would be the right thing to do.
So you think it's not fair, or it can't be fair for Ukraine if they don't have a presence, at least in the same building or country?
It can't be fair, but it's also just this whole idea that, as Ambassador Bolton said, one of Putin's main things is that he just wants us to be a negotiation between the two great men, and the pawn on the table is Ukraine. This whole idea of spheres of influence and great powers can do whatever they want, and they can just go in and take a country by force. And President Trump said this, like, they fought for this land, right? And that means, you know, as Ambassador Bolton said, you know, what's next? It kind of opens up the whole Pandora's box.
Trump also talked about they agreed to go to each other's respective countries. Obviously, if Trump went to Russia, that would be the first time a U.S. president was in Russia since 2013. And if Putin came to the U.S., that would be the first time he was here since 2015. What would you be looking for? I mean, what does that say to you that it's been that long?
Possible thing. I mean, there are two things.
You think it makes sense, actually?
I think it makes sense. Look, how are you going to end a war if you do not talk to the protagonist? This whole idea about order and all of that, I don't know. You know, look, he spent an hour on the phone with Zelensky. If you're not having translations, that's more time than he spent on the phone with Putin. You have Zelensky meeting with Vance, and you had the Secretary of Treasury there talking about an agreement, which he described as a security shield. This is the economic, and he termed it economic and resource and security agreement. So there's something there. It's just some of these instinctive things that Trump says that, you know, makes your hair stand on end.
Like what? What did Trump say today that made your hair stand on end?
I think that he basically said that Ukraine was the cause of this war. You know, he said, I can't remember the phrase, Caitlin, you were there, but he said, you know, that they should have not gone into this, I think was the phrase. It's like, well, I don't think they had a choice when the paratroopers were, you know, going into the airport right outside of Kyiv.
How much of that do you think is the personal relationship factor in this between Trump and Zelensky and shaping his view of this, or Trump and Putin potentially? You
know, I kind of feel like this gets a little bit deeper into this idea of big, powerful countries and big, powerful people should talk. And small countries are weak. And they're, again, the pawns. So I think it's just this very instinctive thing that he can work it out with Putin and it will be okay. And, you know, there wasn't as much today that was said that is different than Biden. There were some important things that were, but Hegseth said those things in the context of a negotiated settlement. No one expects NATO to be a NATO membership as part of a negotiated settlement or getting Crimea back.